Hello, co-journeyers, and welcome back to the Truth Shall Help Me Good. I am your host, Barbara Landry, and together we continue to explore some of the bigger questions about this journey we call life. My special guest today, Tim Smith, never set out to become a writer, but he carried a story that refused to stay buried. Fault Line, Still Standing, is his first book and stands as the result of a long internal reckoning and a refusal to look away. His work blends raw honesty with unexpected humor, giving voice to those who have felt silenced and unseen. Without formal accolades or traditional mentorship, Tim forged his path through persistence and self-determination. Writing became both confrontation and release, a way to face the past without letting it define the future. He lives in Los Angeles with his husband and their 4 dogs, where he continues to create through writing, photography, AI art, and quiet moments of hard-won peace. Both devastating and defiant, Fault Line is more than a memoir of abuse. It is a testament to endurance, an unflinching look at generational cycles, and a reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, something can still grow. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Um, I just want to start off by saying I really enjoyed reading your book in terms of the courage and strength and power that you share with the reader. Um, and at the same time, it was heartbreaking and devastating to see all your pain, and not only your pain, but the pain and the chaos of really all the people around you. So you take us on this brave and courageous journey through your childhood and young adulthood as you face major challenges. I mean, beyond belief, really, that include abuse, neglect, poverty, and as I said, chaos. Can you just take a moment to talk about some of those earliest memories to kind of lay a foundation for what followed?
Yeah, certainly. So one of my first memories I have is swallowing lighter fluid from a Zippo. They used to refill the Zippo lighters in like in the 70s, and my dad was fixing a car, and the lighter fluid was on the front seat, and through most of my childhood, I was really sort of unattended to, and this is really the first example. And so I swallowed the lighter fluid, and I remember it tasting the way it smelled, kind
Right.
of bitter and sharp. And I kind of walked up to my dad, very very proud, and I'm like, I drink this. And I remember like his face just losing all its color. And then sort of the next thing for me is just kind of a little flash, a little blur of rushing. I have sort of a memory, I think, of my stomach being pumped and everything just kind of going dark for me after that. Another incident shortly after that, my dad ran me over with a 1975 Cadillac. I was behind the car. He had just thrown a can or something. And like all little boys, I want to be like my daddy. So I'm mimicking his behavior. And again, no one was watching me. No one was really aware of me or looking for me. And he ran me over. And It's a very unique memory. It's almost just a big flash of red and chrome, coming towards me. Is
Right.
just kind of what the little boy in me remembers. And my dad was a little concerned. My mom was pretty much nonplussed about the thing, and we went to go get a slushie. That was her idea of care. There was no hospital visit. It was really a walk it off kind of a moment. Then when I was 6, she kidnapped me in the morning from my dad, took me off to go be with my stepfather. whom she had met while my dad was in jail. The man that she married had robbed a bank and was shot in the head and had a bullet that was still lodged in his brain that affected his speech center. I was nonverbal for about a year after that. And then as I sort of became a little bit more effeminate, as my body just betrayed who I was, they really honed in on that and really began to attack just who I was as a little boy and who I was becoming.
Can you talk a little bit just about your parents, your dad, Fernie, and your mom, Rhonda?
Yeah,
You told us about James, who enters the picture, but obviously your parents being significant players in this story.
sure.
And also just taking a moment because I think one of the big themes into this story and an opportunity for your readers to really learn about poverty and the generational cycles of ignorance and poverty. A little bit about their own childhoods because their experience as they grew up impacted significantly your experience of being raised by them, right? So can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that?
yeah, absolutely. So my dad's father died before I was born. And as I understand it, he was an alcoholic and was just I think what we call a mean drunk. I think he beat my grandmother and beat the children and was just generally a really unhappy and angry individual. My dad was the opposite of that, was one of the most gentle, most kindest, most loving people that you could know. He wanted to be a good dad. You know, I really believe in my heart he wanted to be a good dad. He just didn't have the tools to do it. And so I think a lot of things that like he did with me, he tried to make up that he maybe didn't have in his childhood. There were lots of moments of affection, little weekend trips, little things that we kind of did together that really helped me, bond with him. And again, all little boys love their dads, right? You can't help but love your daddy when you're a little boy. And so I think he tried to do everything that his dad didn't do for him with me, but some of it, unfortunately, was just superficial or a weekend or one time a year. He had his own, I think he had his own demons, maybe he was trying to hide from or run from. And as much as he wanted to be a good father, he just was not able to. As far as my mother, to me, growing up, it seemed like she had good parents. It seemed like I call them my granny and papa, her parents,
Mhm.
that they, were loving and kind. They always treated me well. And, I think as a little boy, you probably equate that the care and affection you get from grandparents, they must have also given to their children. And I think maybe that was not always the case. I think they were probably a little rough with them. Um, I don't know if it was to the point of abuse and neglect like what I endured with my mother. But I've heard little whispers and little stories there. And, I don't have any evidence to back that up or to corroborate it. But to me, it seemed like they lived a pretty idyllic suburban life. Baby boomers, and a house in a cul-de-sac, and all of those fun things. At the time, and so it seemed like she came from a very idyllic place, and it was kind of hard for me to understand her cruelty and her disdain and indifference towards me.
Mm. So, as far as indifference is concerned, neglect, indifference, disdain, which your mother certainly exhibited toward you, whether she really felt that in her heart, like to still believe that maybe that wasn't the case, but maybe because of her own issues and her own unhappiness, as you talk about in the book. But these are all forms of abuse that don't get talked about as much in but can be as impactful as physical abuse, which you also suffered. I mean, you suffered all of these things.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that indifference and the neglect that comes from a lack of emotional support and how harmful that was to you as much as the physical abuse that you also suffered from your mother as well as James.
Yeah. Um, it felt very isolating and very lonely as a child, and even into my teens. It seemed like no matter what I tried to do to get their attention, to prove I was a good boy, I'm getting good grades in school, I'm good at this, I'm very creative, I'm a hard worker, whatever it is, was just met with basically a shoulder shrug. There was just uh, it was just a big deal. Who cares? One point that I think really sort of helps describe this, right before my junior year in high school, we had the opportunity to enroll in dual enrollment. So we would get college credit and high school credit. And so by the time I would have graduated from high school, I would have had an associate's degree and would have been the first person in my family to have a degree of any type, to have had any kind of higher learning. And so I was very excited about it. I come home and I was like, I've got dual enrollment. The teachers have approved it. I'm very excited to get college. And they were like, okay, yeah, great. Well, whatever. And it wasn't even a like a good for you, or
Right.
we're proud of you, or um, we know where we come from, and this is a pretty big accomplishment. I think you're going to do great. It was nothing like that. It was silence. They just didn't care, and I found it hurtful. I'm not going to lie. Like, I was very
Right.
excited about it, and I was very proud of this accomplishment. And later on, I'd ask about, what was my college fund? Do we have money for college? What are you going to do? I think these are normal questions, right? And they literally laughed in my face, and told me that that was a stupid dream and that I should have no expectation of going to college. And it was kind of in that moment, I think, that I realized that I want to say that trying to hold me down. I don't know if that's the right word, but they just did not have the emotional or intellectual capital to know how to deal with me, how to approach me, how to be my parents. Um, Neither my stepfather, my mother, or my dad.
It made me wonder um, if they were unable to see your win as their win and instead saw any potential for your success, just highlighting their lack of it or their own failures.
Oh, 100%. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, and it took me 30 years after the fact to realize that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think there was, I don't mean this to sound like hubris, but I think there was some jealousy. I think they were
Yes.
jealous of me, right? I was doing good in school. I tried to have friends. I held down a job. I was on the yearbook staff. I was doing all the things. And it just seemed to disappoint them and push them further and further away from me. I would create and be in art classes and be in plays and write, dramas for school, all the stuff we're doing. And, not one time did they show up, not one time did they come, not one time did they read it. One time are they interested in one thing that I did.
Right. Right. In fact, when you entered an art competition, I think that was one of the earliest things. First of
Yeah.
all, I think your teacher even did not encourage you, right? Saying
Yes.
it was too artful almost. It was too modern or something about it. And then,
Yeah.
yeah. So that begs the question because this is such a remarkable part of your story is really with little or no support. I mean, we can talk about your dad's mom in a minute, your grandmother, Ruthie, but literally with virtually no support, you kept doing it anyway. And sometimes when you were undermined so much by circumstance and the people around you, it might have been two steps forward, one step back, but you kept moving forward. Where where do you think that came from? Was it because of the trauma or in spite of the trauma or neither?
Yeah. A very good question. And I have asked myself that question. I've tried to figure out why did I have the audacity to keep going? How dare I hope? How dare I dream? How dare I want to get out of this cigarette stained trailer park? Um, who the hell do I think I am to do that, right? And I don't know where it came from. And I think it may be in spite of the trauma and despite the trauma, right? Like a way to uh, prove my worth that I'm still trying to prove to this day, honestly, in my 50s. Still seeking approval and still seeking parental figures to tell me that they're proud of me. And that is something that will never happen for me. And that's something that will never come for me. And that does sort of, that leaves an empty ache inside of me that there's not quite words for that because language has not been invented for that feeling because no one should feel that way
Mm.
is really how I kind of view that. Um, I just believed, I always believed that there was something better. I don't know what made me think there'd be something better. I don't know why I even had the courage to dream, but I just kept thinking there must be something better. We can do better. There must be something better than this. I just kept hoping, and hope kept me going a long time. You go a lot of years on hope and empty, for
Right.
sure. And I think I'm proof of that.
Yes, and as mentioned on the back of the book cover, stubborn hope. There's
Yeah,
hope and then there's stubborn hope. Um, I'm wondering if it's just part of who you are because even in your of that positivity, that hopefulness, that wanting to see something better, because as you go through the book and describe and talk about your parents, your dad and his, journey of basically just going deeper and deeper into alcoholism and substance abuse and really sort of disappearing on you as a person. And this was somebody who was very, very close to you. And even with your mother, even though the moments were maybe less than you could count on one hand, you describe moments where you were hopeful that she could apologize or show some kind of empathy or some kind of regard for you. So, my experience of your story as you've written it is that that's a part of who you are, is that innate hope and willingness to see the good, willingness to see the good. And maybe that's true for all of us if we can find it within ourselves and cultivate it and be willing to be guided by it. So let's talk a little bit about your dad and your grandmother Ruthie and the best of times with them and how your mom, your mother undermined that over time and just a little bit about that part of the journey, if you would.
yeah, absolutely. So once they'd kidnapped me, she had kept me from him for several months, maybe about a year. And I finally got to see him and have visitation rights with him. And she loved to hold that child support order as a weapon and as a decree and as everything that she could exert power over him and over me and over the situation. And so if he didn't pay his child support, she would not let me see him, plain and simple. And so I only got to see him sporadically. So sometimes it would be every weekend, sometimes every other weekend, sometimes once every 3 months. And he, due to his own addictions, his own inability to take care of himself, we often stayed at my grandmother Ruthie's house. And she had a cinder block, one bedroom house in the panhandle of Florida, right on just right underneath the Alabama state line there, which is where our family's from. And so those times that I stayed with her were the only times I really one, had memories of childhood, full stop. I had memories of her making breakfast in the morning and watching Saturday morning cartoons on her fold-out mattress, and her coming and pulling on my little toes and doing the 10 little piggies are going to market, that kind of thing, right? And she always kept some cigarettes in her smock right here. Uh, those are the memories that is comfortable and that's warmth for me, and we'd sit on her porch and look for four-leaf clovers, which I learned later were just weeds. And I think actually that is the point, right? Like looking for four-leaf clover in weeds, looking for joy in impossible circumstances, trying to find peace and hope in places that just ravage and destroy you. And so I think perhaps that message sort of inadvertently came to me from her, right? Like she was just so loving and caring. And I think she knew what kind of son she had. She knew. He was her favorite. She loved him, but she knew what kind of son she had. And she certainly knew who my mother was, right? And so she was always so good about comforting me, making me my favorite meals, barbecue ribs every time I came to visit, and lemon pie with no meringue,
Mm,
just taking care of me, and the only time I remember getting a hug, and she taught me how to tie my shoes. My mother would get very frustrated and very angry. And if you're a little boy, that does nothing but scare you and tie you in knots. So I for sure I'm not learning how to tie my shoes. And Ruthie, my grandma, came along just like one time, very gentle, showed me how to make that bow. Boom, tied my shoes. Um, and there were good weekends with my dad there as well when he wasn't drinking and he was sober. We would go fishing and go camping and go explore old forts on the coast and lots of fun stuff like that. And I realized later that he himself was a giant man child. He himself, because of his circumstances, I think, because of his father and um, my grandmother not able to maybe protect him because she was dealing with the own violence coming to her as well. That he tried to give himself those things and also give me those things as best he could. He just couldn't keep up the momentum. He just couldn't keep up the follow through. He just didn't know how to. He just didn't know how to. He wanted to. He just didn't know how to.
right, right. And going back to your mom for a minute, one of the things that I really admire and respect about your story and the way you've written it with respect to your mother is your honesty about your feelings. I don't know, there were countless times you said that basically you hated your mother. And
Sure.
right. And so I bring it up because first of all, I think it's really important, especially when we've suffered trauma and to be honest with how it makes us feel and not feel like that we have to make excuses for people who have caused us to suffer.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that your mother made you suffer was to, in your journey of exploring your sexuality, to basically flat out tell you that it was wrong, it was bad, and that she basically hated being the mother of somebody who was gay or even on that exploration.
Yeah.
I think it's important to talk about that and just the impact that it had on you and in writing the book, how difficult was it to express that honesty about your feelings about your mom? It's important, I think, as I said, the honoring of the feelings. Can you talk about what your
Yeah.
experience of that was?
Yeah. I will say my feelings of my mother are conflicted, and remain so. And I think that's normal and healthy in this particular situation. Um, I loved her so much as a little boy. I loved her so much, and I wanted her to love me. I would do anything I could to please her, anything I could to get her love, even after she demonstrated so many times how she felt about me from childhood to my teenage years to even my early 20s. I'd buy her gifts, make her presents, show her any way that I could love her or affection her. And it was just sort of met with a shrug of a shoulder. And about the time I started hit puberty, as I mentioned earlier, and I think a lot of gay people experience this. Our bodies give us away before we know who we are, right? Like our wrist or limp, we have feminine emotions or feminine actions, or say, girly things or things that are considered sissified, and especially growing up in the rural South where boys are supposed to be boys and girls are supposed to be girls. They had a little bit of trouble with me.
Mhm.
And I remember when I was around 12, my mom's best friend told her, that boy is gay, that boy is queer. And it wasn't, she couldn't move to a place to protect her son or to defend her son. She moved to a place of shame and of hurt and of embarrassment, and she just didn't know how to process that. She had her own demons, she had her own problems. I think I see now that she hated herself and she hated her life and she hated her circumstances. She hated living in a trailer park and she hated working at the Waffle House and being a waitress. She hated being disregarded as a throwaway person, as white trash, as we all did. And I think that hurt her, and I don't think that she had a way to express that or get that out. And sometimes I think it came out in undesirable ways, and often I ended up being the attack of that. One time, I was 15. Um, I'd met some stupid boy in high school, and you know how it is when you're a teenager, right? Like it's all hormones and emotions and the most important thing in the world. And reality, it just isn't. But when you're 15, oh, there's a lot going on there. And um, excuse me, she had found my little diary, and I had written the boy's name on it, with a heart. I love so and so. Probably written it 100 times. Every schoolgirl does that in her notebooks. I love Bobby 100 times over and over again. And so she had found that, and she burst into my room one day and questioned me about it. And I just kind of went silent. I was like, just hoped it would get over with, it'd be over with the situation. And we lived in Central Florida at the time. I'm so sorry. I'm going to try to condense this. Okay.
No, you're good.
Um,
You're good. You
we
don't
uh,
need to
we
apologize at all.
Okay. We lived in Central Florida at the time, and so we never really had like health insurance or dental care, and my teeth were pretty rotten at the time. And so I used to take this transit bus up to Gainesville, and there was a dental college, and so all the sort of destitute and poor people in our county rode this bus up, and we got dental work and healthcare. And then I came home, and that was it. And I went up there for several weeks, and Rhonda came to pick me up one afternoon, and she never came to pick me up. Like she
Oh.
never took me to school. She never made me breakfast. She never made lunch. So it was weird that she was there. And so immediately, like I learned how to read through her people's moods and emotions before I learned how to read books, before I learned how to play. I had to learn how to survive before I could go to school. And so when she pulled up, like I knew I could sense the energy from her car, and from her, I knew something was up. We were driving down the interstate, and it's summer in Central Florida, and it's hotter than the devil. And she's quiet, and all of a sudden she has tears, even kind of going down her eyes. And my mother was very good at emotionally manipulating you with tears and with circumstance and with words. And I say in the book, she went to the Joan Collins School of Acting, right? Like she drama queen, right? And so she's got the tears coming down her eyes, and I still love her. That's my mama.
Right.
And so I'm like, Mama, what's wrong? What's happened? And she doesn't say anything. She does another tear and a little thing like that. And I thought maybe James had hurt her, and I was questioning and asking, and she pulls over, and we get off at a rest area, and it's one of the old kind. It's still green and white from the jet age, with sort of the triangled roofs and that sort of thing. And so she pulls over, and we sit down at a concrete bench, and she says, "How close are you and this boy?" And I knew the jig was up, right? Like
Mhm.
I knew it was up. I got that. Um, as I do when I'm nervous or emotionally anxious or feel it coming, I get it right in my belly, and so I could feel it punching. I can still feel those knots in there,
Yeah.
and I stammered a little bit. We're just friends. Um, To which she immediately called BS on it. And told me that she'd read my diary, she had seen everything. She had called his parents, a mess. Um, and so basically, she had told me that it was wrong. I wasn't supposed to do it, that she was ashamed of me. She didn't like having, may I use some of the slurs that she used?
Yes.
Okay. She told me she did not like having a faggot for a son. She did not like having a queer boy in her house, and how ashamed she was of me and how embarrassed she was about my behavior. And I had to promise that I would never do it again. Um, I had to promise not to love. I had to promise not to follow my own biological, emotional instincts. We got home and I had to promise my stepdad I would never do it again. It's a chapter in my book. Fault line's still standing. I promise I'll never do it again.
Right.
Um, I knew when I made that promise it was a lie because I didn't know who I was, but I was starting to know who I was. And being gay was just part of the equation, whether they liked it or society liked it. It was almost one of those things, not necessarily being gay, but just who I am. I couldn't not be who I was. I didn't have the ability to hide being gay. I didn't have the ability to hide being creative. I didn't have the ability to hide being interested in things. I didn't have the ability to hide wanting to do better for myself. And so more of that jealousy and more of that rage and more of that indifference and more of that
Right.
hate grew from there.
Not being able to control you
Yeah.
in the way that
Yeah.
they wanted to.
Yeah. And she would tell me how arrogant I was and not to flip my hair and not to dress this way and not to look good and uh, just to do anything to stay low and look low like them and feel low like them. And damn it, Barbara, I just didn't want to anymore. I just didn't want to
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. So it sounds like that the same I can't hide that you discovered about yourself and expressed about yourself may be the same thing. One of my questions is what compelled you to share your story? Maybe it came from that place, right? The
Agreed.
reckoning, the inability to turn away and the need to give it voice. What do you say
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. I turned away from it for years. I wouldn't even acknowledge it. So many events or things for me in my past were just facts, were just line items on a sheet that we're just going to check off, born, kidnapped, in remedial classes, no
Right.
emotion attached to it because I wasn't ready to face that. Um, I wasn't ready to face the shame and fear and embarrassment of my own life and my background for years. But I knew, maybe for the last 15, 20 years, I knew that the story was in me. I knew that I had to say it. I had to say the truth, whatever it was, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. And sometimes I think I say that as well in my book, Fault Line, that I don't. I knew there was a better way. I knew there was hope. I knew there was a thing, a better path. I just didn't know how to get there yet. But I feel like knowing that there's something better, or knowing that you want to write a book, or knowing you want to create, is the beginning, right?
Right.
Like that's the beginning. Let's start in the beginning. Um, and so I think everything, I do like to describe it as almost like spokes on a wheel, on a bicycle wheel. Like everything really had to line up on that center point for me to be able to write the book. And some of that came with like 3 years of therapy, and being able to reckon my past and see myself honestly and see my past honestly and not be afraid of it. And some of it, I'm still afraid of it. Some of it still, um, you know, gross and grips me, And then there
Mhm.
are some days where I'm like, okay, you know, this is just a splinter on my finger. I'm going to pull this out and we're going to keep
Yeah.
moving on. Um, and some of the things that I endured through childhood and early adulthood and my teenage years with them still stay with me. They still guide my decision making processes. They still teach me about safety and security in the world. Um, and some things that I've learned from that have helped me to, um, I know what I don't like. so I for sure know what I like, right?
Hmm.
So I now in my life, like I have stability, I have security, we have routine. I know that I'm cared for, I know that I'm loved, I know that I have someone to love. And those are all just really basic needs that were never met for me. And so sometimes I think people talk about like wealth and success and dream life, and it always includes, boats and a villa in Italy and a round trip a world of thing and money and loot and all the things. And those things, I think they're great. Go get them if that's what you want. But the things that are like wealth for me are quiet evenings at home with my dogs, um, peaceful sunrises in the morning with a cup of coffee, where I get to imagine my grandmother's there with me. We're enjoying this thing, having my dog on my lap, being able to go out and explore and take photos. That for me is the wealth. That for me is the prosperity. To not have that nagging, lingering voice, not have that shame and that trauma, and to know that I am not those things, that I've created a really wonderful life from less than rubble. And I'm
Wow.
proud of it. And it gives me encouragement and gives me something to really, keep going for.
Wow, that's beautiful, really beautiful. And segues nicely into my next question, which is, many of your readers, many people in the world carry shame about experiences they had no control over, like you. What would you say to someone who is still struggling to separate their worth from their past experiences?
It's a good one. Please don't think that I have it all figured out and that I have the answers. I consider myself a healed person, but I think it also is like being an alcoholic or a drug addict. You're always going to be an alcoholic. You're always going to be a drug addict. There's always going to be some part of that that lingers within me and makes up who I am. What I would encourage people, and listen, it sounds super easy to say it on the podcast, and but I do know that sometimes the circumstances are harder than someone just saying, "You can do it, go for it, thumbs up,"
Right.
right? But I encourage people, and I know it's hard. Believe me, I know it's hard. I
Yeah.
encourage people, believe in yourself. Finally, believe in yourself. Believe in your dream. Um, and I encourage people to take their power back. Take your power back from that past. Take your power back from circumstances and situations and people that no longer support you, no longer believe you, no longer uplift you. Um, and give your power to yourself, to encourage you and change that narrative in your head that you're not good enough or that you're stupid or you're ugly, because you are good enough. You are brilliant. You are attractive. You can do it. You can do it. You just have to believe in yourself. And one other thing I will say, and I know it's cliche and I know it's very trite, but you do have to get to a point where you love yourself. And even I'm going to roll my eyes on that, okay? But like you do. And part of loving yourself is very simple things like just taking care of yourself, having gratitude, looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I love you. You're doing a good job. Even if it's first thing in the morning and you look a mess. Um, I just want people to really know that the power within them is there. You just have to find it. And sometimes it's hard.
And to really do it through action. Sometimes I think we want to have it figured out before we do it. But really, sometimes it's just a matter of just do it. Like you said, the steps, wake up, look in the mirror, say that you love yourself, and not wait for the day when you really maybe,
When you really do,
right? Because that will get you there too, right?
it will. It absolutely will. And I think the last few years, like I've really been able to tap into meditation and yoga and manifestation. And I think that has been a really big tool for me, especially I would say like the last 5 to 6 years. It really has helped kind of quiet my mind. Sometimes it gives me an anchor, helps me to use the tools of my body and my breath to get out of my head. Like sometimes like we're in our heads a lot. And I'm like, can I just screw this thing off for 5 minutes? Because it's really busy up there. And
Yes.
meditation really sort of helps quiet all those voices for
Yes.
me.
Because sometimes I think it's very easy to identify with the the voice in the head, thinking that that's who we are and
Oh,
what
yeah.
we are, when we're
Yeah,
so much more than that, including our hearts and our ability to regulate ourselves if we're willing to, like, as you take our power to do that. We have power over many things within
we do.
ourselves, and to really be able to discover that and cultivate that. So you may have already answered this question, but in the event that you have more you want to say on the subject, what is it that you hope readers will take away from reading Fault Line Still Standing?
I hope that readers will take away that there is hope, that you can be um, not the victim of your circumstances. You're not what happened to you in your past. You're not those voices in your head. You're not what your parents told you. You're not what your grandparents told you. You're not what that trailer park next to the Monsanto factory told you. You are brilliant. You're capable. You're stronger and braver than you ever thought you could be. And you just have to find the courage to do it. And sometimes we are phoenixes. We are going to become something new, but first we have to go through the fire.
Mhm.
And the fire burns, baby. The fire burns, okay?
Yeah.
But you're going to be an amazing phoenix when you're through with that fire. And you just got to go through it.
Yeah.
And it's not easy sometimes, but you just got to go through it.
And you've given us really a roadmap in your book, Fault Lines Still Standing. How do we
Thank
get
you.
our hands on a copy of this?
Certainly. So the easiest way, you can just go to Amazon and search Fault Line Still Standing. Tim Smith, it's there. You can also go to my website, faultlinememoir.com, and purchase it there. And I do have an Instagram account, tim.smith.writes. And there are some excerpts in the book and just little behind the scenes ramblings and little videos of me speaking on there as well, if anyone's interested.
I will post them in my notes for YouTube and Spotify as well. And what a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your courage, your insight, and and your gratitude. I'm very grateful for you. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time to let me share my story in this important conversation. And I love all the work that you do. I've seen some of your podcasts, and some of the stories are so varied and so interesting and pull from so many experiences and walks of life that it really gives such a rounded view of humanity and what I think what we're trying to do.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Take care and
Thank
be
you. Bye
well.
bye.
Bye bye.